I mean, if you walk in a bank and you say, I'm going to help you save $500 million a year, like, yes. But how though? Yeah, we have this AI model that can run through your transactions to do X, Y, Z. So for them, how you do it?
It's not the problem, just the results.
Exactly. Most of the knowledge you're looking for is already out there. It's just the question of how do I apply it and having the discipline, the commitment to see it through. Because I think people give up too soon, right? So you start something, oh, this div is not aligning, I quit. You would get it, right? So that's the thing. So for me, it was more like every time you try, this is not working, you learn something new. Then you build up on top of that.
I think the biggest problem that I've found is holding on to an idea or holding to a business that is not working. With your judgment, how do you use that to say, move on to something next because this is not going to work?
Being honest with yourself, because I think most of us as entrepreneurs started out with copying Western ideas, which is like, this idea in the garage, and I wanted to do. We need to have our own narrative. So for me, my narrative is just like, I want to make money. As simple as that. Like, is this thing going to make me money or not? As simple as that. But what our solution essentially does is, we put AI on any camera to help keep your city safe. So what we are doing as the next step now is, taking on the new wave of AI, which is your ChatGPT. So the question now is, okay, how can you do the same where you have an AI that understands what's happening on your camera and provide insights just using natural language so that you, as an operator, you don't have to sit on the screen. You just have a system running in the background managing all that for you.
So welcome to another episode of Three and Company, right? This is our episode number what? Number 4?
Number 4, yeah.
About number 4, yeah.
No, there's number 5.
Yeah.
One was like
cut off.
I don't know what happened, but I shined on that one.
George never shines. Yeah, so welcome to another episode of Three and Company. Usual suspects in the room. We have Chinedu, we have George, and today we have for you Kelvin. Right? What are we looking to do today? I don't know. Have another conversation. We like to think about it that it's you coming into everyday conversation that you would have. It's not an interview of any one of us. It's really a growing experience to figure out what's on your mind, how can we share, what's on your heart, and then how best can we interpret that for the rest of the company and the three.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Kelvin, welcome to Three and Company.
Thank you. Hi.
I don't know, in a way, when we have these conversations, maybe around the three of us, it's really just your background would be a great start, because then that kind of lets us know who you are, right? And then from that, we kind of begin to think about, I don't know, themes of what you would like to discuss. Your expertise, obviously, I think you being on Three and Company, there is a subject matter that you're an expert of. If you could talk about that a little bit, that would be good as well.
Awesome. So my name is Kelvin Aongola, born Zambian, grew up mostly in the northwestern part of Zambia.
Wow. Okay.
So you're looking at Mufumbo district, Pika, Serenje, skipped Lusaka, went all the way to Mazabuka, then back to Lusaka. Then in 2022, I moved to South Africa. So that's where I did my high school. Finished, then moved to Kenya, where I did theology for 4 years. So that's sort of a small background.
Can I take you back? So you said 2022 or 2002, which one?
2002, yes.
I was saying, like you were going into the future.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a very interesting background.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was school there.
I didn't know there was a homeboy there.
So the thing is, my parents used to move a lot. So my dad used to work as an accountant. So for him, he always had this whole thing of travel. So you get from one city to another, looking for opportunities. So that's how we ended up moving to Northwestern.
I think I've got a school question when we
get to it.
I hope it's going to be the same one.
No,
we might as well raise it now. What was your question? Maybe it makes sense to.
Only because this introduction is more like a background, yes, but he hasn't talked about his expertise yet. But expertise, I'm now like, okay, fine, this guy is like in a whole different space and a different field, right? And then how did he, the school choice again, is it a family choice or is it his choice? So many questions that I like have in my head. Or was it like, it's going to get me to my next level of what I'm trying to do for the future, right? Yeah, because it's like a whole different space and a whole different field. That's the question I had.
Can I write on top of that so that maybe he answers all the questions?
Should I say yes or no?
You have to stop.
Yeah, sure. Why? No, you can write
on top of it. Yeah.
Right on top of it.
So one of the points you made was around theology.
Yeah.
So strange.
Yeah.
So of course we know you are going to get into the background of what you're currently doing now. But why theology?
Yeah. Can I say though?
Yes.
Chinadu is wearing a Zambian T-shirt.
Ah, come on.
Come on, like, Zambia one nation.
I was wondering about that.
I know.
Flying colors.
Fully branded.
1964, is that the whole?
Like, you know.
Okay.
Well done.
Yeah.
64 is like the...
Independent.
No, don't say it aloud, please.
Oh.
No.
I thought it's the year. We haven't gotten there yet.
Wait,
though.
is it 1964?
Yeah, ish, guys. It will be like
History.
It is 1964.
Yeah. Okay. What was the
How
question?
did theology happen?
yeah.
Oh yeah. So with theology, it wasn't my choice initially because I wanted to do psychology and philosophy.
Yeah.
But then my parents thought this is the equivalent of sending you to the army to give you foundation.
Yeah.
Because once you get the basics in a theology school, then you can figure whatever you need to figure out in life. So that was the thinking. So I went to theology school saying, okay, I'm just going to focus on the psychology and the philosophy of the subject because it was part of it. But then I ended up tapping into all sorts of subjects at the end of the day.
Wow.
Yeah. And then also, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it was like, okay, what do you want to do?
That's what I wanted to ask.
So it's like, I'm not sure. It's like, well,
Yeah, well, what did Kelvin want to do?
I think I've always had the same dream to become a doctor.
Yeah.
But as you...
Actual operating on people? Doctor?
I
Or
didn't
doctor
even know
in
which
only
specialty it was.
Okay,
I just thought I just want to be a doctor because for me in my head it was just
Yeah.
like a white uniform and
Okay.
that was the picture of a doctor. But then as you progress, you start seeing like, okay, what am I really good at? Am I good at these subjects that will allow me to become a doctor? Like, nah, you're not good at that. Then you're left in this whole, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
So for me, I wasn't really sure with the direction I wanted to take from a career standpoint.
At what age?
I think I was 18. Yeah.
What did all the moving around do for young Kelvin?
So I think for me, it gave me a broader perspective in terms of, how to think. Because, the way Bembas think in Mpika, Serenja is different. And the way Kaondes think in Northwestern is completely different. So having all this experience sort of gives you like an easier way of interacting with people from pretty much anywhere. Because you sort of have a template. So for me, that was the first thing.
So would you say, if I can maybe add that, would you say, especially from the theology standpoint, especially philosophy and getting to know people, would you then say that also those experiences with how to interact with people across the different environments you work in, that it has shaped you even now? Does that contribute into the journey of Kelvin right now? Yes.
Yeah, no, it does. Because one of the reasoning that my parents had was, you are good with people. So I was always that kid who would like talk to adults and they're telling you like all these heavy subjects, just like, wow, I can say one or two things. So I was that kind of kid. So they kind of had the impression that, okay, maybe he would be a good pastor because he's naturally good at this people thing. So I could meet a person today and be able to connect and dig deep in some of their heavy issues. So that was me back then. I'm not sure if I'm still the same person, but
Very much so, I think.
So local, moving in different spaces, and then looking at it from an international perspective, what kind of exposure did you have now? Okay, fine, you talked about Mpika and you talked about this side, but what's that international perspective that you got, exposure that you got, and it kind of like helped you grow as well?
Internationally or locally? Or?
No, internationally, because you went to Kenya, you went to...
Yeah, so I think moving to Kenya, for me, it helped me a lot with language.
Yeah.
Because it gave me this whole concept. Because when I tell people, like, I speak or understand 14 languages, like, oh my God, you're so smart. I'm like, no, it's actually... it's just like if you can speak 2, 3, 4, then suddenly you can pick up everything within a month or two, you can speak all that. But moving to Kenya, it just taught me a lot about hustle.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like in Zambia, we're a little bit laid back. It's like, it's okay. But in Kenya, there's like urgency.
I don't feel offended by that.
Yeah, no, really. Because when I went to Kenya, it sort of gave me sort of a belief that you could set something in your mind and just do it somehow. Because the environment just pushes you to think like that. And then comparing that to Zambia, not that we are slow, we are not as urgent. It's like here, the struggle is not as compared to Kenya. So going to Kenya for me was just like, oh wow, this is the level of thinking you need to have if you want to achieve anything.
South Africa?
South Africa, it was more on, a combination of like a mini Europe. And it's like, oh, this is Africa, this is what's happening, but here's like a mini Europe experience of what you can do professionally, right? So I think growing up in the age of what I sort of Mix It. I don't know if you know Mix It.
So
it used to be this.
Come on. But explain to the audience maybe.
So anyway, Mix It was like the WhatsApp back in the day. So you could like chat to anybody for like 2 rands or something. So seeing all these things sort of happening and just hearing stories from this guy came up with this idea, he built it, now we're all using it. So I always had this idea that, okay, maybe one day, but I just didn't know the how or the strong push. But going to Kenya and then seeing, like guys doing those kinds of things that are
from scratch,
interesting. But then also like having first-hand experience with like on-the-ground problems. Because while I was doing my studies, we did a lot of attachment work. So they will send you like deep in the village where you get to experience what does it mean not to have internet. And I'm not saying this from like a typical Africa is disconnected. It's just they don't have a tower there.
It's remote, right?
You get it. So, but when you see how they live and how they're trying to survive, it's also giving you ideas. It's okay, how could you possibly solve this kind of problem?
Would you say, for instance, that if I may, that especially if you look at your life now in hindsight, so your move from first the provinces within Zambia, then to Kenya, then to South Africa, and then I want to believe your final move or push into Europe. Would you look at it now in hindsight as being something sequential leading to a bigger overall picture of what your personal vision for your life is? How would you frame that in your own words when you look back in hindsight now?
So I think it just goes back to the simple, everything happens for a reason. So I would say, had I not found myself, let's say, in Mfumbe, for example, because that was my first sort of exposure to tech. And this was like, we were watching like Terminator because some NGO guy came there. It's just like, I have this cassette, it's Terminator 2, watch it. So I was just like, wow, this is so interesting. So that gave me an idea about tech. But then it's at a time where you don't have enough references to say, okay, who's actually doing that in my immediate environment? So as you're growing up, you have this belief in this concept around technology, what you could do with it. So all the steps in my life, eventually to where I am now, it's like a trigger event.
And that's what I was
it's like I was trying to say, okay, where can I find like a motherboard? This is like 1997. It's like, so it's like fast forward 2000, like, okay, now we have a PC. Interesting, but how can I actually program this thing? So it's like small steps. Eventually, when you reach a point, you're like, oh, now I can actually try and experiment on these sort of ideas that I've had since back then.
And for me, I think maybe that's where the question comes in terms of where does theology fit into who you are now? Like, was theology then a wasted experience?
No, it wasn't. I mean, after I graduated, because I was very arrogant, I was like, that's a waste of time. No, because I didn't want people to associate me to like being a pastor. Because when I get this, I was like, so people come with like spiritual questions. I'm just like, I don't really subscribe. So no, I think as I grow older, it wasn't a wasted experience because everything that I'm doing at the end of the day, it's people business. You need to understand how to work with people, how to address their problems. So the in-between is just a means to that. So with theology, you learn how to do that. You know, the psychology, you know, how to address people's hopes and so on. So not a waste at all.
Yeah.
How did the transition happen now to what you're doing now? What is that story?
Yeah, so while I was I think the first year when I just arrived at the institution, I looked at the curriculum, attended the first class. I was just like, this is not for me.
How long did you do theology for?
4 years.
Yeah, no.
No question.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, like, you know, your parents have already, we've already paid everything, so you just have to stay. So I think when I saw the curriculum, I was like, okay, no, this is not for me.
During that journey,
So the first bit was more of, you know, because when I was going there, I had like a completely different idea. I was like, okay, I'm going to do theology. They're going to teach me how to do exorcisms. I'm going to see like all dimensions and everything. But then when I was looking at the curriculum, I was like, I'm not seeing anything. Right? Like this is all stuff that, you know, anybody can do. So when I went through that, I said to myself, okay, fine, I'm going to do this for the sake of my parents. But in between, I need to figure out what is it that really pushes me. Like, what do I want to do with my life? So for me, it was also a moment to just sit back and ask myself the question, like, what do you really want to do with your life? So I think after the first semester, second semester, I was like, okay, guys, this is not going to work for me. So I remember telling my dad, I said, look, I want to switch. I want to do, you know, IT. Like, but I've already paid for everything. You can do IT, but use your money.
It's on your budget.
So that was the first step. And then when I did my first attachment in the, like, deep in the rurals. So one of the problems is, you know, the things that we think is common sense for us is not common sense there, and it has nothing to do with, you know, how intelligent they are or anything. It's just how the world works there. So one of the problems that they had was toilets. So there are these very funny toilets. We just have like you just dig and then you put some trees on top and the shelter. Right? Exactly. But the thing is, these are sort of like they're not stable. It's like the next day it's already collapsed. So whenever you go in there, you have to like hold on, just in case you can just jump out. So when I saw that, I'm just like, okay, I can just simply Google like how do you build like a toilet, so when I saw it, I'm just like, oh, interesting. You know, what if this knowledge could just be, you know, brought down to where people are with the technology they're using? So back then it was just simple phones. So that was step one. Then step two, it was around miracles, right? So there was a family that we visited, and their mom hadn't been working for almost 2 weeks. I think she was like 60 or so. So it was 3 of us, and one of my friends goes, guys, we need to test our, you know, theology right now. We need to pray to make things happen. But then I was thinking, like, guys, we know deep down, like, we haven't, we are still learning, right? So the first thing we did was ask, okay, what's your diet, you know? And then they explained, no, we eat this every day. This is what she does for work. And she was doing like a lot of heavy, like, you know, farming and all that kind of stuff. So the problem was diet. It had nothing to do with, you know, spiritualism or anything. But they believed that was the issue. And when they saw us, the assumption was, oh, the missionaries are here. They're going to pray for us. Things will be okay. So my other 2 friends were so eager to prove they're like, no, bro, let's just pray about it. I'm like, guys, let's just use common sense and just ask, okay. So they explained to us we're just eating like vegetables with ugali, aka and shima, like every single day. And I'm like, nah, this is not gonna work. So maybe let's buy some fruits, let's make some fruit salad, let's 3 meals a day. So we did that for like a whole week. Following week, she was walking perfectly fine. But for this, like, oh no, this is a miracle. I'm like, no, it's just diet. It has nothing to do. Right? So when I saw that, I figured, okay, you need to share more of this knowledge so that people realize that some of these problems can be solved without, you know, praying. Not that prayer is not important, but some things is common sense. That's when I started thinking, like, what if we had an app in Kiswahili where they could just say, I'm feeling tired, what could I do? Then my mind just flipped to say, okay, buddy, get into tech. So the first thing I did was buy books on programming. So my parents would send me money for school. I'll cut half of it and buy programming books.
Self-starter.
Yeah. So I was just like, I'll explain. Like, there's a reason to this. I was like, we received that email. Like, you didn't pay fees on time. What's going on? Like, no, I'll pay. So that was the first step. So I started buying books myself on, how do you build software and so on. Then memories from a childhood me started coming on, like, oh wait, I've always had interest in tech. This is it.
Yeah.
Wow. I like the aspect of it where you didn't build the toilet. You went and sort of provided this platform where they can get that information from. So instead of giving you the fish, I teach you how to fish, right? So then you can go on and create. There's some spirituality in that in itself, you know what I mean? Yeah, because the idea, if you think about illumination, right, which is pretty much one of the bases of spirituality and theology, right? Which is why you do psychology and philosophy and all these things. It fits actually very well into finding a medium through which you could channel an interest that you already had. That's crazy.
Maybe another thing to add to just the point you've made is, I mean, in listening to him, what he comes across is typically someone who thinks that there are certain problems that you can inherently find a solution for. They're not outside your reach. That seems to be what comes out the most.
Right.
But at the same time, in a strange manner of speaking, and this is, of course, the fortune of witnessing God acting in a very practical manner, that He doesn't come down from heaven to solve the problem. He sends people who have the knowledge to share that knowledge with people in a way that, again, puts them in touch with it. So in a manner of speaking, it is a miracle, just not the way they expected it.
Exactly.
And that's part of the thing where if we are hand-holding ourselves in this journey of life, then to a point, God is ever present. It's just that He's not present the way we anticipate. Like you said, you were looking for exorcism as a course.
No, really. Like, I had no idea. Like, that was I was just like, I want to go back home and say, guys, I was able to encounter these demons. This is what I did. But it doesn't work like that. I mean, if anything, faith is the most practical thing ever. Like,
true.
Like this whole idea that there's a magic somewhere. I mean, after the flood, people had to wait for things to grow.
Of course,
So it wasn't just like, veggies, whatever.
Exactly. I'm curious with your definition of tech. And it's a good thing that you mentioned Terminator. At the time I was watching Terminator, but I didn't understand it was technology, right? I was like, this machine, like, that kind of thing, right? And then also how you use it also to apply to solutions that you, a lot of things, because I feel like you also mentioned like, okay, fine, I Googled, I use tech, I use whatever. What would you then define tech, also just going back again to your problem solving skills, as in how, do you see it as, do you kind of like see it as a way that will, I'm just putting words in your mouth, but if we were solving African problems, how do you think that tech sometimes could be a solution for a lot of African problems? Even like not just the hard tech, but even the simplest tech, but with your kind of like perception around how you see tech and solving problems with you have. But I kind of see that some of the struggles that we have, if we put it in a context, tech can actually can help us. I'm not saying that we have got issues, I'm just saying.
It's okay, George. So I think for me, when it comes to Africa, I think there was a period in my life where we thought everything needs an app, but that's not the case. So tech only solves 10% like of the problem. The rest, I think, is just organization. So you can't like rely 100% on say, hey, we're gonna need an app that's gonna solve. So I'll give an example. There was a time when I was so convinced we can solve, the passport office with the passport registration. But then, like remotely, I thought this is so obvious. But until you get close, then you realize, this is only 10%. Like there's a whole organizational thing that you need to solve. It doesn't even include tech. It's just people, business,
organization, right?
So that's how I would see it.
I want to bring it back a bit to theology, right? And I just want to attach, because like I think like you really opened up my mind in terms of, because you did theology, you know what I mean, and you ended up in a different space. But what is the place of spirituality in tech? Like how do you say it?
Wow.
That's a good question.
I know.
Yeah, so
Yeah, from your perspective, there's no wrong or right
I don't know
answer.
why, but I'm having like this funny joke.
You could share.
No, there's this funny joke about like who was the first person to like receive data from the cloud.
Yeah.
Moses.
I came down as the commandments, right?
Tech existed, right?
No, really, like because sometimes it's like, wow, they're storing everybody's
That's
name
like
on
3D
Earth.
printing.
Like, is there like
If you
a
think
cloud
about it,
service?
3D
in there?
printed,
No,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think, so for me, the way I see tech, it's a tool,
Yeah.
right? So the same way, God allowed the children of Israel to say, hey, these are the tools we're going to use to build X and so on. So it's a means for progress,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Whether you are a Sunday keeper, Sabbath keeper, whatever religion you have. So tech is just a tool that you use. And as humans, we are not fixated in, like a starting point of this is what God created, but we are meant to evolve, right, spiritually and so on. So towards that evolution, there are tools that you need that you can actually use, physical tools. So technology is one of that.
Yeah.
But just like any other tool, can also be used for bad.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You get it.
Right.
So that's one aspect of it in terms of growth and progress of people. And then the other bit, I think it's more on trying to understand, what limitations we have as people, right? So I think tech just sort of helps us realize that.
Yeah.
So there's a limit.
Right. Right.
And that limit, that's where now you realize that, there's actually a whole bigger entity out there where tech won't be able to be, become the solution or the answer.
Yeah, you've put that perfect. In your transition, right? When now, because when you said you went on your first, well, we're talking about the woman who couldn't work for.
Yeah.
Was that in Kenya or was it in South Africa?
That was in Kenya.
That was in Kenya.
Then after that, I also went to like school with kids having special needs, and they just broke me.
And then you sold.
You've got like a whole. Also, high school was South Africa.
Yeah.
Then theology happened in Kenya.
Yeah.
So most of your, let's say, after school tertiary happened in Kenya, right? Yeah, which is where you're based now as well.
No, I'm now based in the Netherlands.
There you go.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up, and I think we've dealt enough about your background and the motivations behind why you are the Kelvin that we know now. However, maybe before we move in mainstream, it would be a bit of, I don't know whether it would be permitted for us to ask, the transition from your final South Africa to the Netherlands, how did that happen? And what was the occasion? What was behind that move?
Yeah.
Maybe you could give us some insight into that.
Yeah, so before I moved to the Netherlands, I decided to come back to Zambia.
Okay.
So in Zambia, I was doing a whole lot of things, like building everything from, your job portals, marketplaces, e-commerce, like way back. So I was just trying out to see what could work, and nothing was really working.
Yeah.
How long were you in Zambia for this period?
4 years-ish.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Of just trying. So we tried everything, because there was like, you could do, you could solve for mobile money, you could solve for recruitment, you could solve for healthcare, you could solve for government, you could. So I was trying all these things, but I couldn't really find success, except for the newspapers, because newspapers back then, it's like them going digital is a big thing.
Yeah.
So that's where I was able to do make simple apps for newspapers, that kind of stuff. So while all this was happening, I was sort of building up a bit of a reputation, so to speak. And while that was happening, I was working with Sam Sariri, or Sam Sariri. So Sam, he had this idea to connect doctors to patients.
Yeah.
And
I know Sam.
Exactly. Yeah. So we had been talking, working on different projects with him. So I thought, hey, this is what I'm working on. So we had this relationship for a very long time.
Yeah.
So while that was happening, I decided to jump into healthcare, because I thought I could do something in healthcare. So I built my own small app. Sorry if I was bashing apps, but I had to. So I built this small app for skin cancer detection. So the idea was take a picture, get to know what kind of disease you have. Dermatologist 5 kilometer radius, you could just tap into and say hi, hello. So I built this simple app. Then I pitched it to the South African Innovation Summit. So it was just starting. Then I was invited to Joburg to go pitch. So I went there, I pitched it, I won the competition.
Wow. Nice.
I was offered some investment, but the requirement was you need to move to Joburg. So while that was happening, Sam was also trying to find ways to fund this, telemedicine app of his. And that's when he reached out to say, listen, we got an investor from the Netherlands, but I need a CTO. Do you want to join? So I'm thinking, team, Netherlands, one-man show, cool idea. We don't even know if the data sets are there, but let's do the Netherlands. So that's how I ended up joining Sam to the Netherlands to be his CTO.
But what was the offer on the investment for you to stay in SA?
And
how did that decision come about? Like, there's money this side, and there's a hope being sold this side.
So I think it should have been, almost 3 million rands in total. Yeah, back then that was like a lot of money.
Which year was that, by the way?
This was in 2016. 2016.
It was about 2 million question about
Hey, USD is?
USD would have been much less, maybe 700,000 maybe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so that was the money. But then also, it's like, you have a demo, but then you also know what the limits are. So this was just like, you know what, it's safe. I don't want to take people's money. Because the thing is, with what I'd built, it had so many challenges. It was a great concept, big problem to solve. But the thing is, there wasn't just enough, African data sets to build that thing as a scalable solution. So that was one. And then the second bit was, forming a team and all that kind of stuff. It was just like, okay, let's just let this go and let's go on the other side of the equation. So that was the thinking process there.
Okay. So could you walk us through the transition? So now you've basically been presented with this opportunity with Sam, and then the Netherlands was beckoning. So how did that happen, and what was your transition to the Netherlands? What then happened when you got there?
So after that, I had to let go of the offer in Joburg. I said, okay, guys, thank you very much. I'll be focusing on the telemedicine platform, because I think also it's because with what Sam had built, it already had traction, distribution, validation, and everything. But what I had was just like, okay, you still have to deal with regulation, you still have to deal. So I'm like, okay, I don't even know how to deal with all those things. Let me just go where it's safe. So that was also the thinking. So once I made that decision, I reached out to Sam, started doing the paperwork to move to the Netherlands. It was a very swift process, and that's how we ended up moving there. So I think the first thing that I was supposed to do was to sort of create a digital version of their platform, because back then it was a call center number, so you had to dial in, and then the doctor would say hi, hello, and so on. So the next step was, okay, can we get this on the web? And then next to that also, we had to raise money to actually, make it scalable, because it was just like, guys, if you want to reach, because our pitch was, there's one doctor to every 1,000 patients, right? So we want to cut that whole process such that everybody has access to a doctor. So we had to bring that to a digital experience.
What was the offer, the Netherlands one? Since we have an idea, this was about 3 million. What was the offer on this side?
Unfortunately, I can't say.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
On to the next question.
I can dive into that. So,
right.
So can I phrase that question in a different light? Was it substantially higher than the South African?
So it wasn't about money. So for me, it was about the network and the opportunities that it came with. Right. So I mean, you could go the other side where you have like a 3 million rand. You burn through that money quickly, but do you have the ecosystem and the network to the next step? So for the Netherlands, it's more like, okay, this is how much they're giving you, and this is how much more you could raise. But besides the cash, it's also the network and the exposure. And then also there's this thing where, there are certain dynamics that you can't have here if you want to be the successful product. It only happens on the other side of the equation. So for me, I was thinking in terms of like, resource-wise, that's where you want to be.
I think the biggest question, with the current status quo, maybe you could talk about it, maybe in founders, is that there's money being presented, and it's sort of like seen as an escape for like, oh yeah, I was in the buying of my app, or the buying of my business, and all of that. It's more like in investor terms, you actually call it exit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're pretty much looking at it from okay, there's exit, but there's also, you're defining networks as also a resource in a way. I'm just curious how, maybe some advice that you can give with why that's more beneficial than the exit. Yeah.
So I think if you're going to build a business,
Yeah.
with what I know now,
Yeah.
I would say step one, build the network.
Yeah.
Before you even build anything, like just build like a strong network of angel investors, VCs, and not just a database and an Excel sheet with email address, but these are people that you can actually talk to.
Yeah, interact with.
Okay, that's one. And then the reason why you want to do that is because you can start anything.
Yeah.
And it would be easier for you to raise, the right amount of capital when you need it, because you have the relationship. Like raising money is just relationships at the end of the day. Because I've seen guys with, I have a PDF, 1 million, and it's not because they were too intelligent, too qualified. It's just that they have a very good network and like an actual relationship with VCs, angel investors, and so on. So it's also about knowing where can you get access to these people in an ecosystem, as opposed to I need to first talk to you before I introduce you to X, because but on the other side it's just a coffee away and that's it.
Could I probably do a lead-on question to George's, which is how would you distinguish between raises done in Europe or in Europe specifically, because that's where you are. Raises done in Europe versus done in Africa. What have you seen to be the most distinguishing features of raises like that?
Yeah, it's hard to raise money in Africa. No, it's hard to raise money in Africa because the requirements for the due diligence, the whatever, they're just too high. In Europe, it's easier because there they have a culture of trust, right? Because they know that, okay, I'm going to give you money, and I believe you're going to do it because that's the culture. That's one. Then number two, they have several instruments, to de-risk the opportunity. But here, it's like, man, is this thing gonna work? Like, you need to give me 10, 50 reasons why this thing won't fail. So that just means that you have to have some revenue, you have to have some solid team, and so on.
You put up even collateral on top of the raises you are doing.
You get it, and that's one. And then the other bit is just that, we don't have too many African stories when it comes to, building that trust, because most of the money obviously is coming. But even among ourselves, the sad thing is, if I became, let's say, a billionaire at some point, I don't know, for some reason, it's like there's this psychology where I don't want to interact with everybody. It's like, I want to hang around with this group. I'm not going to give you my money. Even if you pitch to me, I want you to have Harvard level credentials for me to give you money. Right? But on the other side, they don't look at it that way. For them, it's about trust. It's okay, this is the ecosystem. I trust you. You mess it up. I do have, instruments to de-risk this whole thing.
Can I do something else? So maybe for the sake of viewers, potential investors that are out there, if say in this portion of Africa, Southern Africa, Zambia to be specific, we want to build that sort of framework, what would be the foundations we need to put up for that to de-risk, like you said, to basically to match the standards that are currently found in Europe? How would we go about it? What would you say? What are the guiding tips? That's original.
Thank you for that question.
So the thing is, you can't just copy paste what's happening in Europe, right? I think the first thing is being deliberate about, how we're setting up local ecosystems. But then also what kind of tone are we setting up in terms of the ambition, for entrepreneurs, right? And then also it's okay to say, look, there are certain ideas that won't fly here, but if you position them to say these are ideas that would work elsewhere. So having that initial mindset where local founders are thinking beyond their borders, that's step one. Because if a person outside comes and says, I want to give you money, and you're giving him context that's only relevant to you, they are not seeing the big picture, right? So the mindset has to change, and how we set the ambition. So this is your accelerators, your angel investors, they need to set the bar for entrepreneurs. And then entrepreneurs also, they need to be given incentives to think to that level. So you can give me 200,000 kwacha to build a multi-billion-dollar company. It's like, bro.
Yeah.
So that's where it starts. But if you're giving me like small money, I'm just gonna bid for something that works local, and then that becomes a trend, and then it's not as attractive for external investment.
So going back again to, let me ride. Keeps on saying that, but let me ride on the conversation that's around investment, right? And I like that you mentioned the aspect of I think the clarity that I needed was the raising of the fund, but from who is the question, right? If we're talking about raising from the fund, we're talking about it from a global perspective, saying, okay, fine, I'm raising funds. So mean that maybe global playing field. So you can, if you're an African business or you're an African startup, you can raise funds from anywhere, right? So maybe we can raise from the international perspective or from the international investor. So I'm actually looking at it from a, who would better understand the African context of raising funds. And if you were like, maybe, because you've seen both ends, right? You've seen how investment looks like, or investor needs are in this other space, and also investment needs are in this other space. How would you then marry the two in that, okay, African business, if you're like more like when you're looking at it from a global perspective, like you are now an investor, you're investing in a European business, you're investing in African business. I know the criteria is very, very different, but then how would you make the other investors kind of understand what the goals are for a business in Africa and how it works to achieve its goal, and a business in Europe and how it works to achieve its goal? That at least maybe there should be a playing field here.
So at the end of the day, the simple answer is numbers, man.
Numbers.
That's it. Like you can put up the most amazing, social good pitch about why Africa and all that. It's great, but at the end of the day, it's numbers. So it all goes back to, are we working on businesses that are actually generating that 10x for investors?
Right.
And then I think also it's okay to say we want to make money. Like it doesn't have to sound soft and we're trying to like
altruistic all the time.
Because sometimes there's this sense of, man, I don't wanna. I was talking to another friend. I was asking him like, dude, show me your pitch. So he gave me his whole pitch, but on the numbers it was like
so you're dancing around.
So I'm like, so what's up with your numbers? Like, nah, dude, I don't do the numbers thing. I'm like, you have a great solution, but you need to tell the same story in numbers.
Numbers,
right? And then also, so I think that's your answer. It's the numbers. If you can show that, hey, I'm building a business with a 10x return for you, it just makes it easier. Because even when I started my current business, I did the other way around, because everybody was showing up with a pitch deck, a presentation. I was like, no, I'll show up with numbers.
Numbers first.
Then it wasn't even about, oh, you black, you from Africa. It was just like, oh, we see the numbers.
And in numbers, do you mean traction, right? In terms of people, of potential market? That's already started using what would be an MVP or something? Or are we talking about numbers in terms of cash flows?
It depends on the stage, but I think if you're just starting out, it could be your users, your early adopters, and like a very clear like unit economics. Like you should be able to say, this is my X, this is what I'm getting back, and this is how I'm going to grow it to 10x over X amount of years. If you can get to that formula, then it becomes clear. So there's like a lot of money out there. It's just that the story with the businesses that are being built here, it's like great solution. It's like I have 50,000 users, like how many I'm paying though. We'll still figure it out. Let's just do the Facebook things. Like the Facebook strategy is different. Like we can't just copy paste those models and think an investor find it attractive. Like especially in this climate. Like now it's just like, hey, show me numbers. Whether you're saving lives or you're saving, like just show me. Your numbers,
Maybe also just from a contextual point of view, would you then say perhaps that because of the differences, like you said, between Europe, the US, and some of those foreign clients to Africa, you have structures in place, obviously, that make a lot of these details verifiable. Now here, even if someone said I have 50,000 users, the investor you are talking about has no frame of reference about Africa.
Yeah.
So again, it's
Context.
an unknown variable. If it was where he was coming from, it would be clear to say, look, I understand this climate. These stats, I can easily verify them to be sure that they are indeed happening. But here, I mean, I'm only taking your word for it. And basically the news I get from the media or the newspapers are not very good. So, of course, if you don't do your due diligence to bring that detail, at least to enable me to ask the next set of questions, it would be very difficult.
Exactly.
Which brings me then to the point, which is, we've spoken about your journey and everything else, but we've not necessarily dwelt on exactly what it is that you are doing in Netherlands. So would you want to maybe give us a bit of an eye view on that, perhaps, and unpack that a little bit?
Cool. So in the Netherlands, I started an AI company focused on public safety, defense, and mining in 2018.
Right.
So essentially what we do is we make your cameras intelligent and aware of what's happening, and most importantly, help you make decisions more efficiently based on data.
Okay.
But why AI? I mean, especially the backdrop of theology and philosophy. And yes, you mentioned a bit of computers, but why AI? Why?
So the reason why I chose AI was because when I was starting this thing, my question was like, okay, I've done everything you can imagine to build in tech. And the way I would see tech for me was just like, okay, everybody's like, oh, I'm building an app that allows you to do X to X. It's like connected technology basically. So I'm like, just a database with two forms and that's it. And then, so for me, the question was, I need to challenge myself to do something where it's not too saturated, one. And then number two, where I'm actually learning something new. Because at the time, AI was like, oh, you need to have a PhD in computer vision for you to do this. So for me, I was just like, I see like a simpler way to do this thing. So maybe let me do that. And because it was not saturated, I kind of realized that there could be an opportunity to build something out of it. As opposed to build another, I'm trying to save Africa app.
A quick one. So, from the terms of your background and, I mean, your course of study and everything else, I don't know, I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues here, but I'm still trying to find the direct correlation from what you read, what you studied, and all the way into AI that we claim, like you said, it's a specialized field. So maybe if you were giving advice to some of those who are pursuing that career, who feel it is a very hard terrain to go into and all, knowing what you know now, what would be some of the steps you would advocate for?
So I think anybody can learn anything, because I've never sat like in your computer science class. I've never even sat in a even my Udemy courses, I would watch up to 25 lessons. I'm like, I get it. I'd rather learn in the actual application of these things. And the thing is, when it comes to knowledge, the way I see knowledge that is meant to create economic value, we are all trying to figure things out. Like, how do I generate value out of what I know? And most of it is just trying and failing. But then you have to tell yourself that, look, it's not a fixed requirement that, look, you need to have a degree in this to acquire ABCD. It also goes back to you as a person. So for me, the drive was more on, I've done all these other things before, there's nothing new, but I've never done AI before. It's a very close subject, it sounds very complicated, but I have interest in it, and I see how I can use it to actually build a business out of it. So mindset also is the first step, of course. And what you studied is important, but also you need to be aware that as a human being, you need to evolve with the time. Like, you can't say because I have a degree in X, that's it. Like, you need to reach a point where it's okay to tell yourself that, look, I am going to learn something completely new, use it, create value, and keep myself alive without asking for permission. So for me, that was the mindset. Because it's like, oh, but you don't have it. Because I would pitch to investors like, but what is your background? I'm like, theology, but theology from Kenya, and you're trying to do X, Y, Z. But then for me, those hurdles were more of a stepping block to the next bit, where I would say, okay, great, I just need to demonstrate that whatever issues he has, not true. So I'll go and say, oh, no, it's actually working. You can click a button, right? So I think it all goes back to your mindset and your drive as an individual. So for me, that was one of the first things. Was just like, okay, I've done theology. Now I'm trying to do AI. I have no idea what this thing is, but I need to get into it anyways.
How difficult was it in Netherlands? So, I really am grateful that you gave the example you gave. So for the first initial set of pitches, coming from one terrain into another terrain in a foreign country, how difficult was it initially for you? How much rejections did you get? What was it like?
It was really tough because one, I didn't have the network or the references. Number two, I didn't have like any like good startup for reference to say, oh, I built this thing, that's why you need to trust me. So I think the first 6 months, it was just a lot of no. It was like, it's either we like the concept, but you don't have the expertise. We like the concept, but do you understand regulation? We like the concept, but do you have the resources, the team to do all X, Y, Z? So it was just a whole lot of no's. I mean, the first 3 months I was just like, maybe I should just get a normal job like anybody else. But then for me, it was also like, okay, what would happen if I actually, managed to crack this thing? So all those no's, I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna prove them wrong. Right. So I was
motivator.
So I just switched it to like, okay, tell me no one more time. Right. Then I would go back home, switch on my laptop, start doing research. And the funny thing is, most of the knowledge you're looking for is already out there. It's just the question of how do I apply it and having the discipline, the commitment to see it through. Because I think people give up too soon. Right. So you start something. Oh, this div is not aligning, I quit. You would get it, right? So that's the thing. So for me, it was more like every time you try, this is not working, you learn something new. Then you build up on top of that. So in terms of comparisons, it was really hard. It took a while to build that trust. And that trust came as a result of being able to show that, okay, you've built something that people can actually use. They don't even know who you are, but it's working. So if anything, results beat theory basically.
So we have like 5 minutes, George.
So if I'm bringing back the question, I think going back again to the question I asked about African context, right? You are looking into bringing the solution in Zambia, specifically maybe Africa, you call it. And I think basic understanding when you talk about AI, ChatGPT has taken over, like to define what AI is. And it's much easier to explain it because the concept actually works. But how would you simplify it for me to really understand it from not a ChatGPT perspective, but to look at it from your solution that you're providing and say, okay, fine, this is what AI is, and in simple terms, to make us understand how the context actually works for Africa.
I think the pitch shouldn't even be about AI. Focus more on the problem that you're solving. And then the how, that's where the AI fits in. Because I think I once made the mistake of saying, we are an AI company that can do A, B, C, D. So people just focus on it's complicated. Thank you. But
because with AI has to define.
Exactly. But then when you focus more on, here's how I'm solving your current X, and here's how it's done, here's the benefit, then the end user's like, but how though? I've understood the value, I've understood the how, but like, how does it work? Or like, what's the magic thing? The AI. Like even in our presentations, we stopped saying we're an AI company. We just talk about what the customers' problems are in a language that's familiar to them. And then in those conversations, like, but how are you guys doing it? Because we've been like, there's a bit of AI somewhere. And trust me, we've seen like a huge change in terms of adoption. Because also there's just like a lot of noise where people don't really know what to listen to. Because it's like, oh, what is this vision AI? Is this text AI? But if you just focus more on what the problem is, how you're solving it, then the explanation becomes easier. So that has been our template so far.
And people bought into it? Okay, cool.
I mean, if you walk in a bank and you say, I'm going to help you save $500 million a year, like, yes. But how though? I mean, I have this AI model that can run through your transactions to do X, Y, Z. So for them, how you do it?
It's not the problem, just the results.
Exactly.
I'm curious, how many businesses how many ideas that turned into businesses have you built? And would you say that maybe the current one that you're on is like the one, that kind of thing where it's like you've run through the trenches, you've done whatever, and then it's like you hit that milestone where it's like I've arrived. So as in, how would you say this this current situation is right now, and with how many businesses you built?
Yeah, so for me, building business has always been, a means to an end. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is. So I think I've built, over 5 businesses where it's registered at Pakra. Right? So, and ideas, man, I've had thousands of ideas. Maybe not like in a number of thousands, but I've had too many ideas. So everything from, you want to build the next. So so the way it works is you're going to reach a phase where you're just copying and pasting what's already out there, trying to recreate the same thing because you're trying to prove something. Then where you're going to add like a small feature that makes it unique. Then there'll be a period where you're just thinking of, okay, this is an idea from the ground up. So for me, I've done everything from the digital space to healthcare, security, and so on. So I think 10 plus-ish, 10 less failed ideas, right? Some did take off, just wrong timing. So I've done, for example, one of the things that I was trying to do was helping newspapers to get into the digital space with different ad revenue streams, yada yada. It worked out well with one newspaper. 50,000 downloads later, biggest downloads ever, like back in the day.
Interesting.
But that didn't become like a successful business because the very next year they're just like, oh, we could build the same app.
We don't need you.
Out of the equation, right? I've tried, e-commerce, where you're trying to sell products online because you think people in the Cantemba situation will be given enough incentives. It's just like, dude, our ecosystem works. Fails, you think, oh, I'm going to do the next fintech, so let me talk to Airtel or MTN. Then you realize, oh, they like the idea, but then there are other things like, do you have a team? Do you have the expertise to actually scale this thing? And you realize, okay, bad idea. So I've been through all those phases. But with what I'm doing now, I would say this is the longest project I've sort of sat on, like for 5 years. Because for me, there was too many things tied into it. Right, so you have somebody to answer to because they've given you money. Number 2, you have access to very sensitive data, so you can't just treat this as another idea. So whatever it is that you're doing, you're giving it 100%. So you're not saying I'm working on this thing, but I have another extra job. So for me, this was like all in 100%. Like you don't have to do anything extra. So this for me isn't, so to speak, the final. Because I still have other things that I've realized over time, so this is how you think about new ideas, about building new businesses and so on. And there are so many more in the pipeline.
Cool. Going back again to help me sort of like not hold on to something that I feel is like success. Because again, I think the biggest problem that I've found is holding on to something to an idea or holding to a business that is not working. But with your judgment, how do you use that to say, let me move on to something next because this is not going to work? Like, what is that thing that you use to make a decision and say, okay, you know what, I've done this business, but also you give it like a grace period and say, okay, fine, this is my final straw, and then you move on to the next one. Because I can imagine, I think with current situation, businesses that I've helped as well, is that they will hold on to something for a long period of time and not just make that decision and say, even if maybe mentors, advisors speak to them, it's just like, okay, this is my idea. But help me understand how you make those decisions.
I think it depends on where you are in life. Right? Because let's say if you just graduated from high school, it's easy to fall in love with the idea.
I see,
let's say if you're at the phase where, hey, I can't find a job, but I have this cool app idea and I believe it's going to crack it. It's easy to fall in love with your idea. But for me, I got out of that train of thought when my responsibilities in life changed, where I realized that, okay, I'm not a 20-year-old where people are forgiving. It's like people are expecting more from you. Where, when you first start saying like, why don't you just get a job?
Hey, that question.
Right. And the problem is that you've sort of convinced yourself in this narrative to say, look, all these questions are just part of the struggle. They don't understand me. This is a sign that this thing might work. That's the other bit, that you need to let go of the idea that, just because there's this sort of rejection, it's a sign that you're meant to do this. Sometimes it's a sign that there's no need for this very thing that you're trying to pursue. Right? And then the other bit is more on being honest with yourself, because I think most of us as entrepreneurs started out with copying Western ideas, which is like, this idea in the garage, and I wanted to do. We need to have our own narrative. So for me, my narrative is just like, I want to make money.
Okay.
Simple as that. Like, is this thing gonna make me money or not? Simple as that. If it doesn't give me the answer to that question of does it, have any money, then don't do it. Because at the end of the day, it becomes costly to you. Great idea, but you're suffering. On that note, do not buy a domain name until there's enough users for your solution. Because I once made that mistake where I thought, guys, I'm like my last 200 kwacha. Let me just buy a domain name, they'll come. But they never showed up, right? I could have just bought myself noodles and some food.
Waited it up.
Yeah, you get it. So I think for me, that's the mindset. Even though people say, oh no, it's not about the money, you are building a business, right? And you cannot serve people without, thinking of it in terms of how is it sustainable, how do you grow it to actually serve people. So it's all about money.
So maybe a question I would ask would be, I'm sure a lot of us here around the table, to a certain extent, we are fairly familiar with the entrepreneurial mindset and spirit. And like you rightly pointed out, the journey is fraught with frustrations, challenges, and everything else. From your experience in walking that pathway all the way from Zambia to the Netherlands, for instance, what have you had to navigate? I know. I had to ask this question. I have to ask it. And of course, we're not.
You have no idea,
but what have you had to navigate aside things like the very obvious rejections?
So rejection is just part of the game. You have to be comfortable and okay with it. Like you should be able to say, oh, thanks for rejecting me, but listen, can we have coffee tomorrow? That's it. Like no hard feelings.
Professional way of
like no professional way, because before then I would think a no meant I'm not worthy for this thing. I suck. I'm a bad idea. Who does he think he is? I'm the one who actually built this thing. So in terms of the experience, I would say entrepreneurship is probably one of the hardest things you could ever do in your life. And I wouldn't encourage anybody to do it.
But why
I know this is anti-motivating because it's very difficult, right? So in my own experience, I think when I started out, because I received an investment, it was, we're gonna conquer it, right? But when you actually have to go to market, where you have to sell your product, there's so many things that will go wrong, and things will just go wrong. That's just the part of the whole journey. But on a personal level, I think it does a number on you mentally, because you're going to experience things that you're not prepared for. Your journey is different, and you're going to see things that you didn't expect. So in my case, I think initially I started out from a survivalist mindset, where it's just like, I need to make everything work without paying attention to what's happening mentally. So it's just like, hey, you wake up, guys, we need this feature like yesterday. That's the only way this thing's gonna work, right? But while all this stress is taking hold of you, you're not paying attention. So it took me at least 4 years for me to actually hit a wall where you realize that, hey, hold on, what's happening? So everything from sleepless nights where you just lose sleep because you're thinking too much, anxiety because you didn't know. And the thing is, these are not things that you can predict. They just happen at random, right? So for me, it took me at least 4 years to step back and say, look, business number 2, personal health number 1, family number 1, everything else, like your business is just what you do. It shouldn't be tied to you as a person, because the toll it takes on you, it's not worth it at the end of the day, because you don't want to say, oh, I'm a multi-billionaire but with an exit, but I need to service myself in healthcare because of X, right? So I think for me, being in a new country, being black, and I'm saying being black not in the sense of people are racist, well, they are racist somewhere, but it's being black in the sense that you are in an environment where you are not familiar with like how do I navigate from a cultural standpoint. And then number 2, because you did theology, you're dealing with people who have like, the master's from Harvard or a PhD in X, so you have that bit of intimidation where you're doubting yourself and you're thinking, man, I'm trying to do this complex thing. I don't have the same credentials as they do. So that belief, in yourself is also a challenge, where you begin to doubt yourself. You're thinking, am I going to do this or not? And then next to that, there's also just how the whole VC space works, right? You know, if you find yourself as, you know, among maybe 1 or 2 black people in a group of thousands, to really get the attention out of everybody, man, like,
oh, I see.
it's a lot. It's a lot. And even if when you arrive at that door, it's just like, okay, I fought your PhDs, I fought your master's. What do you want more, right? It's like, we like this, but we don't like you, though. Right? Then you have to fight through all that. And it's not a dislike purely because you're incompetent. It's just a cultural thing where people are like, we just don't have enough references to make a decision to see if this thing's going to work or not. And then on a personal level, that the rejection of putting so much hours, so much time, it just hits you really hard, right? To a point where you start now questioning, like, man, all those hours that I sacrificed, you know, having time for family, friends, building relationships, I could have been doing something else, but this thing that's actually a good thing on deck is taking a toll. So, I mean, putting all that together, you know, the rejection, you know, it's like, okay, here's another company doing the same thing. They just raised 10 million, but they don't have anything. It's just like, but why? Right? So at the end of the day, for me, I think I went through everything you could imagine, you know, your anxiety, your depression, sleepless nights, losing weight. Like, I only started gaining weight, like, recently.
Congratulations.
No, really, it was that bad where, you know, when you're dating somebody, it's just like, hey, she don't look manly. Like, get some, something going, right? Because you're not giving, like, I don't see how you can defend me in a fight. I'm like, wow,
won't win a fight.
You get it? So it really does take a toll on you. But for me, the switch happened when I started, you know, disconnecting myself from the business. So look, I am not the business. This is just what I do. It's like a job to me. Like, I shouldn't put my whole life into it as a deciding factor. So I had to separate the two. But then most importantly, also talk to your therapist.
Cool. Then which leads into the I like the aspect, only because maybe I have some ideas of what your next steps are, but maybe this is the right time to actually have the conversation on what you're planning on, what the next adventure is. So if you don't mind, you can tell us, or maybe it's something that's
hush. No, there's no hush hush. Who knows? This could be like 100,000 views. So anyway, what our solution essentially does is, we put AI on any camera to help keep your city safe. So what we are doing as the next step now is, taking on the new wave of AI, which is your ChatGPTs. So the question now is, okay, how can you do the same where you have an AI that understands what's happening on your camera and provide insights just using natural language, so that you, as an operator, you don't have to sit on the screen. You just have a system running in the background managing all that for you.
So that's what something related to psychology or therapy and.
What do you mean? But so that's on a business level, but on a personal level, it's more, because I think where the business is now, it's more of strategy, politics, scale. But on a personal level, it's more on prioritizing, personal, mental health, family, friends. Because the thing is, everybody talks about, I want to hit an exit. Like, you cannot build your whole entire life towards an exit. Like, live in the moment.
True.
I mean, it's the same thing with faith, right? In Africa, it's like we have to be in heaven to enjoy. But I'm of the view that it happens now.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Profound.
Both? Yeah. I was going to ask something around what George asked, and it's really just around one decision matrix, and I think you already talked about that. And I was going to say, you did kind of put into context how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur, right? But at the same time, I think at the beginning you said Kelvin was sort of meant to be an entrepreneur. Like, you felt like you were built for that kind of life, right? In a way. Would you say that?
No. So here's the thing.
Are you born an entrepreneur or you made? There's a chicken and egg situation.
Because actually, so where I'm going with it, as you answer that one, right, is what would Kelvin now say to Theology Kelvin, to high school essay Kelvin, to Mufumbwe Kelvin?
So I don't believe that people were born or meant to be entrepreneurs. You could become anything. I know it sounds cliche, but you could literally become anything.
You're right.
Another line, you set your mind to. So for me, I don't, now where I am now, when I look back, So for me, it was just a means to say, look, what can I do to make sense of my life? Like, what am I going to pursue? You know, my talent is art. I like creating things.
There you go.
And how am I going to use my art into, you know, creating a professional career out of it? So entrepreneurship was that.
Yeah.
So it was not like I was born to be an entrepreneur, so to speak. I just chose to say, okay, this is the easiest route for me to monetize what I know.
Okay.
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 In terms of what I would tell myself a few steps back, I think I should have been more specialized. Like, do what everybody else is doing and be more specialized, because the funny thing is, when you're an entrepreneur, there are certain things that people who are specialized cannot see.
Yeah.
And when you're an entrepreneur, there's certain advantages that you see in being specialized. Just like, man, if only I had a degree in that thing, I could do X, Y, Z. So there's this sort of blessing in disguise sort of set up in a way. So if I would have the choice, it would be specialize in something, because it would sort of get you quicker to where you want to go, as opposed to going through all this route. Because with business, you have a new idea, human minds, like first we have to reject it. We need consensus from everybody to believe into it, and that takes time.
So looking at the timing that we have and everything else, I don't know, we just probably do around the table and see whether there are any last remarks. So looking at the fact that we have an audience here, and we have what I like to call an entrepreneur of international repute. Please don't spit. Don't spit. Whatever you do, don't spit.
I always think I'm just like a global citizen.
Yeah, like that's even better.
Yeah.
So an entrepreneur.
I think that's more like egotistic. Let's bring it back. Local entrepreneur.
So maybe what would you give us advice? I mean, we have a few minutes. I'm sure we can go around. So like quick, like 1 minute advice.
So I think be okay with failing. It's part of the process. Number 2, don't settle for what's already set out there. Like literally go after what your mind is telling you, so long it's legal.
That's a good one. Okay.
And then the last bit, I think what's most important is always people. So investors, people, your customers, understand the people that you're doing whatever it is that you're doing for. And then the in-between will just fall into place, so long people are the center of whatever it is that you're trying to pursue.
Fantastic.
Both. Well, my first part is the part about it being legal was for George. So, George, write that down. I think, like for me, like what you've really opened up is people. You know, as an entrepreneur, and I think specialization then becomes like a real thing. The decision matrix. You know what I mean? Which is okay. We have a problem. Will this problem make money? And then do we have the tools to do it? Right. I think for me that's the biggest takeaway.
George?
There's a lot of takeaways. I'm even surprised that we don't even, as much as I'm his friends, but we don't even have these very nice, wise conversations.
Because you always want to talk about
illegal things.
Don't blow his cover.
I told you that legal one for George.
But I think it's just perspective of what tech is. I think that we've really, the context of what tech is, I think we've really generalized it to, and we put like a very huge, heavy, jargon way of how we're defining it, especially from the African context. But even simplifying it, I think the part that really got me was even the movies that I watched, you know, as in like being tech, right? But I think that was sort of like the introduction of what tech was. If we are talking about technology, I think keeping it very simple for people in my circles, or people to simplify it, make them understand, and not make it too heavy for them not to understand. But it's in our day-to-day. It's in how we do things. It's in how we operate. As long as it's more like a means to make something easy, you know, that kind of thing, or maybe introducing something that's made easy. I think just more like that context itself is what really is my takeaway. So I understand what tech is, but it's just more like, okay, fine. How do I then make it very context to the African context, or maybe to my circle context? So I think that's my biggest takeaway. And also I think it's just more like, the failures and all of that. I think it's just, I was really curious around that, how he makes decisions based on, like, with so many businesses that you have built, maybe so many ideas that you've built, even though we haven't fully exploded. But there was like a lot of things that, okay, if I speak of it from a personal point of view, I think that Kelvin was back then, Kelvin was the guy, things that are implemented now, he already thought of them.
Yeah.
Like, there was one time when we were walking to Monday Hill, and he showed me this, this billboard, and he put, I think when was that, bro?
That was 2013.
20 whatever. So, like, for example, he used advertising. For example, if you are a telco, being, for example, like an MTN, and you see whatever MTN billboard, and you use your phone to just take a picture.
Yeah.
And then you'd actually, it's a standalone poster, right?
Yeah.
But then if you use that and take, I don't know what thing that you used, but you can actually play was it playing a video?
Yeah, augmented reality.
Yeah, playing a video of the actual ad for you to better understand it.
I see.
But that was like, dude, like, yeah, like, I was like just going to Monday Hill to buy chicken and noodles and explaining to me this sophisticated technology. So so I think it's just more like, as in I think interesting enough that those tools that we had then, but they were not really feasible now, or they would actually work now. But I don't know if this is the right time to even bring them out, but it's the fact that forward thinking and just that those things that he implemented or maybe tried at the time, except that the resources were not there, but he actually did them. So happy to be where you are now.
Thank you. So I know in the interest of time, there's not too much to add that hasn't already been covered on the ground. Thank you very much for being the guest of repute. In fact, you did yourself an over-service, and probably if we could, we'll drag you in for another one here. So feel free to visit. But our quick takeaways from here is that I think you've given the audience an insight into what the journey of an entrepreneur represents. And you are very honest enough to be blunt. You are not painting pictures of glory and splendor and everything else, and that's very helpful for the journeys that some of the viewers would be undertaking themselves. We look forward to having you on subsequent podcasts, so please make sure to visit. In fact, set up a branch here. Don't do everything in Netherlands. Set up a branch here. But thank you very much for being the sort of guest that we've picked up so much from. We look forward to publishing this and probably to receiving a lot of feedback from Netherlands as well. Thank you.
Thank you.